Hello, welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. Why do we do these? Sorry, asking myself the first question.
I feel like you're going to say that.
Sorry. We do these because it's nice to know what is behind people that are doing different entrepreneurial things. So it's not just this amazing entrepreneurial thing, it is, they actually did this and this and this, and that's why they're able to do this thing, and then things kind of make sense. And if you're watching this, you can understand what you might be doing and what might enable you to do things as well. And this is a particularly good one, so please watch. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, Andrew, why were you born in Australia?
That's a really interesting start. And I was chatting to you about this before this, and sometimes the parts of your own story don't click that they actually shaped what you're doing, your startup journey, and everything else that came forward. So it was really interesting that you brought this up. So my dad and his brother, they migrated to Australia from Indonesia, obviously well before I was born. But through a bit of a happenstance, my dad managed to stay here, sorted out all of the fancy paperwork, all of those things. His brother wasn't so good at admin and couldn't kind of keep it together, so he had to leave after a certain point in time. So for me, with that knowledge, I felt like my life was a bit of a flip of a coin as to whether I was born in Australia or whether I was born in Indonesia. And so in the back of my mind growing up with all of the amazing things that we have in the country today, great education system, great healthcare system, a great safety net, I always felt like I could have just as easily been born in a developing country that didn't have as many of those things. And for me, in everything that I've done in terms of approach to education, approach to life, all of those things, I've always had that in the back of my mind that there's a responsibility to embrace those things, first of all, and secondly, to kind of use that platform to help create a level playing field for people that don't necessarily have those things. As a result of that, leaning into things like reshaping healthcare, reshaping education, and reshaping access to the arts, three things for me that were really valuable about my upbringing in Australia, and bringing them to other people were things that I tended to focus on.
Okay, so really interesting kind of sliding door moment. Tell me about how you became a consultant as another example.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was in my last semester of university. I was trying to go to as much as I could go to in terms of like problem solving workshops, leadership and communication workshops, technology workshops, just to learn all of the kind of extra things that I wanted to learn. But in the meantime, I was actually working and doing things in the music industry. I ended up walking into the wrong room. So I was going to so many of these things that I walked into the wrong room. It turned out that in that room, they were having the case interview for a consulting firm. And the case interview question happened to be around the music industry. I wasn't supposed to be in there. People had gone through 3 or 4 different interviews to be in there. But I think the guy that was running it just thought it was kind of hilarious that this person that had experience in the music industry and liked problem solving walked into a case interview about problem solving in the music industry. I ended up skipping their interview process and was kind of invited straight into the firm to help build out their music practice, and accidentally became a consultant. I never thought that was going to happen.
Okay, I'm sure students watching this, hoping they get a position at Deloitte or Accenture, are really happy to hear that. But
yeah,
but it worked out okay.
Absolutely.
Like to kind of scoot in, have that consulting experience. That was a nice start and exposure to a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
Why then did starting a startup in the form of Maslow make sense? And maybe for people watching, what is Maslow? And then why did it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been part of the UTS and the startup community for a number of years, from some of the origins of UTS Startups 5 or 6 plus years ago. And so most people know me as a founder of Maslow. And I'll give you a bit of why we started, and that'll help understand what it became. But while I was working at Accenture, I was working in the healthcare space. A friend of mine had a traumatic injury. It resulted in him being paralyzed. He went from training for triathlons to being in a rehab hospital for 9 months, and then going home to a care team of about 20 different carers, all of whom were trying to do their best to support him at home, but didn't have the information to know the little things, like what was his exercise program, what was his nutrition program, what was his, what was his hygiene program, all of those things, or just how he wanted to be supported at home. And as a result, they were explaining things over and over again to every single different carer that was coming in. It was frustrating for the family. It didn't work. A friend of mine who was a therapist and myself, who was kind of looking at things from a very product lens, hacked together some low-code solutions to bring all of their information in one place. We just took a fancy project management tool and taught the carers how to use it, taught the therapists how to use it, and taught the family how to use it. And pretty immediately, the carers, the therapists, the family in the hospital said, I have no idea why this type of thing doesn't exist already. This is a great thing to have. You should do this for more people. And we thought, well, yeah, maybe we should, but we don't really know how. And that's where we stepped into, I guess, the startup ecosystem, where a lot of people have these types of ideas and are thinking about and supporting one another to scale them out, make them sustainable, and learn how to be leaders or founders to kind of create and scale these platforms out. So, we accidentally became founders as well, I guess. All of this seems like life's been a bit of a happy accident, but when you can figure out how one thing leads to another, interestingly, some of the questions you're asking, and use that to determine what your next steps are, it can be a very, very powerful tool to have.
But then, wonderful track record after that as well. Pretty much every accelerator of note in this area, I think you've been part of in different ways.
Yeah.
What did that experience kind of bring to the company and yourself?
Yeah, I think, I can talk about it in hindsight, and I can talk about it at the time as well. When we kind of landed in the startup ecosystem around all of the different startup mentors and all of the different startup accelerator programs and venture capital companies and people telling you to do things certain ways, that's the advice that we listened to, and that's what we were surrounded by. And that type of advice was things like try and find your $1 billion market, all of those things. Figure out your $1 billion market and put it on the slide deck. Things like go and raise capital from one of the Australian VC companies, or all of the enter all of the pitch competitions and go in all of the programs. And that's what it felt like we were supposed to be doing as a startup. Those things were amazing to learn from, but looking back, one of the things that I felt like we should have been doing is figuring out how to build a great product and sell it to as many customers as we can to make an impact in their lives. And everything else is, I can say it's just fluff. It's sometimes useful fluff, but sometimes it's not useful fluff. And distinguishing between those things can be very, very difficult when you're navigating building a startup for the first time. Yeah.
Do you think there are some high concentrations of fluff out there versus low concentrations?
Absolutely. It's really hard to distill between those things. You're always going to speak to mentors. They're always going to ask you to do very similar things. The VCs are going to try and get you to build a company in a particular way, but there's a million different ways to build a company. Not all of them require venture capital. Not all of them require being in accelerator programs. Not all of them require building the perfect pitch, but every single one of them requires selling something to someone who's willing to pay for it. So distilling between those things can be very, very difficult, but there's absolutely high concentrations of fluff. I'm going to vaguely point to the VC ecosystem as one of those concentrations of fluff. It's not the only way to run a business. Raising capital is absolutely not an end goal. There are so many businesses that are doing amazingly, have made a massive impact on society, have made the founders very rich, have fundamentally changed an industry that you will never see posted about in the Startup Daily or by any of the VC companies out there.
Well, it's kind of interesting the incentives people have, as someone that's motivated to support the society around you and have impact on people that need it. To have something with 15,000 families served and building into this really interesting company now that's still continuing is quite sustainable. I would be extremely happy with that, but how does that sit with the investors?
Yeah, absolutely. For kind of candor, as part of growing our company, we did raise small amounts of capital from angel investors. We did go into some accelerator programs which were dilutive. But in terms of the financial success of our company today, by no means is it venture scale. By no means are we a global tech company that's 50xing somebody's portfolio, but we are generating a profit and we're able to do that sustainably. It is an interesting and awkward relationship in terms of having investors on our cap table or as safe notes, that when we think about what we want to do as a company, which is make an impact for people and families with disabilities and help them take control of their care and do that sustainably, versus a different incentive, which is to drive value in somebody's portfolio, sometimes those two things can be competing. And going back, yes, we probably do things differently, but as a first-time founder, it's hard to find that hindsight, and it's also hard to cut through the fluff to make some of those better decisions. It's a necessary growing experience to be able to go through those things and to learn those things, but it's only with hindsight, for me personally, that I'm able to see that. But it's also why we do things like this. You say why UTS Startups does things like this. I think why founders turn up to some of these things, it's about paying it forward. It's about remembering when we were in your position and people were giving us advice and we had no idea what it meant, but we still had to go through it anyway. Interesting being on the other side of that, because there's so many things that I would want to tell and guide first-time founders on that might just seem very theoretical or very principle-driven, but will impact you one day and you will have to learn. So that's where I'm coming from, sharing some of those learnings and being there for different first-time founders.
I told you this would be good. So I think that advice is exemplified in what you're doing now. So I think to start talking people through what Nifty is, your next company, will show how you've changed, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is Nifty?
So in a nutshell, Nifty builds low-code solutions for large-scale enterprises. We take the best practices from the startup ecosystem, the things that startups are really good at, which is building quick and hacky MVPs out of cool products like Notion or Airtable or Bubble or Webflow or other low-code solutions. We take them to enterprises that are used to going to like the big firms like Deloitte or Accenture and paying millions and millions of dollars for like a heavyweight Salesforce implementation that goes nowhere. And we get them to we use startup practices to build them a solution within months rather than years, or weeks rather than months. We get them to an MVP, and then we use their customer feedback and their business user feedback to iterate that using real feedback and changing the product in response to their market needs, rather than doing a whole bunch of documentation for a year and never actually deploying anything, which is the status quo in a lot of enterprises. So in a nutshell, we take low-code solutions, we back them with best practice consulting practices, and we use those two things to transform large-scale enterprises globally.
Okay, that's a really neat kind of summation of everything you've done so far in a single company. To be able to sell and understand problems like a consultant, like the big name consultants that you've been in, and to have all the technology and kind of talent connections that startups have and to apply that to it. I think it's an underappreciated part of startups and the impact they have is that kind of new solutions being provided to large companies and learning spillovers and competitive pressure and things like that. It's not just the companies themselves, it's everything else that they generate.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what kind of companies are you dealing with? And you've been around for 9 months?
Yeah, so I'd say as Nifty, we started signing our first contracts about 9 months ago. Reflecting on the two different journeys, Maslow versus Nifty, the first couple of years of Maslow were a slog. We were trying to figure out what we're doing, we're trying to figure out how we sold things to people, all of that. But it was a necessary slog in order to be able to identify those things in the future. Nifty, from day one, we signed Netflix and Disney in the US. That's almost what caused us to step in there, and did an excellent job with them for a really healthy margin from day one. Because of the success of those implementations coming back to the platforms that we were implementing, namely Airtable, we were recognized almost immediately as one of the top low-code solution implementers in the world. And as a result of that, we have a very healthy pipeline of more enterprises at the scale of Netflix and Disney coming to our door asking for our services. I think the reason I compare those two journeys is because there was a necessary learning journey in Maslow about how to be a founder, how to identify value, how to prioritize your operations and cut out the fluff, but it was applied from day one to the blank canvas or the new canvas that was Nifty to enable a fair bit of success out of the gates.
How easy is making money in Nifty versus Maslow?
They're two very different businesses, but to answer that question directly first, it's a lot easier to make money in Nifty than it has been in Maslow. And it's the little things like finding people that are flush with cash and figuring out a service that they're going to pay for and just selling it to them. It sounds really dumb and it sounds really simple, but I think something that as startup founders and the startup ecosystem we often get wrong is trying to innovate too much for things and trying to overcomplicate things kind of for the sake of it sounding really great and innovative, when there are so many tried and tested business models out there, so many tried and tested go-to-market strategies out there, so many tried and tested industries in there that have an amazing blueprint that you can more or less use to ensure success. We tend to overcomplicate things in the startup ecosystem for the sake of innovation or for the sake of some VC trying to invite you to be like a generational company or something like that. When in fact, if you're just trying to build a business, sometimes the simplest path is the quickest path to success.
Where has the talent been coming from Nifty?
Yeah, so back to kind of our unique value proposition and how that maps to talent. Nifty's unique value proposition is bringing traditional consulting best practices, but applying them to low-code solutions that startups are really good at, and then having the adaptability and flexibility that a startup has. So the people that are really good at those low-code solutions are often like product-led founders who've had to hack together solutions themselves just to get something to market, just like we did at Maslow. It's often people within large, messy organizations that have had kind of the grit to say, I'm just going to hack together a new tool for my enterprise and roll it out because I'm sick of the bureaucracy. Those people tend to be really good at hacking together solutions as well. And so we bring those people into our company and we match them with, and we steal consultants from industry. We match them with them, put them on engagements to bring those two best practices together so that they can build the solutions, but also help the large scale companies transform and adopt those solutions and evolve with them. Because unfortunately, it is not as simple as just build a solution, throw it out there and people will use it. If it were, everyone would do it. Backing low code solutions with large scale transformation expertise is essential to get businesses of, or teams of 500 to 1,000 people using your Airtable solution or using your Notion database that you've built out for them. So yeah, often it's ex-founders.
This is crazy. Like to go back a year, 2 years, Airtable would have been laughed out of most places. Yep. And now to see, places like UTS using it yep. at the scale that we are, maybe without noticing that actual scale. It's amazing the adoption that it's gotten, and to use it well means so much more as well.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of the places that have hacked those things together are probably unlocking about 10% of the value of kind of automation, AI, all of the great things that come with low-code solutions. Not to spruik too much, but we help you kind of unlock that remaining 90% of your untapped low-code brain, as they say, in large-scale enterprises. And it is also interesting, some of the clients coming to us now are like banking clients asking us to implement Airtable into organizations of thousands of people within a highly regulated environment. So low-code platforms have absolutely come a long way since then.
God. And just for any of those people that might be watching, how much money do you think you're saving those companies, the likes of Netflix, et cetera?
Absolutely. I mean, a perfect example is a bank coming to us to roll out a really quick and a quick but robust solution in months rather than years. Their alternative is paying Deloitte or Accenture millions and millions of dollars for a large-scale Salesforce implementation with really high licensing fees that takes 9 months or a year of documentation before anything even gets deployed a year later, by which time what they've designed is completely redundant. So by taking a more startup approach and engaging with us to get something to market in months rather than years, they're definitely saving millions of dollars compared to those more conventional consulting transformation programs.
Okay. Where did you see Airtable first?
Sorry. That's quite funny. while we were at UTS Startups, it was, I think you guys were using it before us, and we saw that and said that's a great backbone for Maslow as a company. And Maslow eventually became fully built on Airtable as our backbone CRM, product management system, content management system, etc. Airtable was the thing that we then mostly automated in order to become a sustainable company. But yeah, I mean, we heard it here at UTS Startups first.
Hey, thanks very much. Okay, a couple of maybe harder ones to finish up this too. If you could go back 6 years and tell yourself something, a couple of things, what would it be?
I think there's two things from a startup and business leadership perspective that I would tell myself. One is, regardless of the fact that we were trying to build an impact-driven company and a purpose-driven company that was meant to, that had the vision of changing the way people accessed care, it still had to be financially viable and profitable, because you can't pay for your employees and all of your other costs in purpose, but you can pay them in dollars. So it's really important to, frankly, when running a business, really truly understand and take seriously the fact that you're there to make money, and that money helps you make impact. So those two things are not mutually exclusive. We honestly went through periods where it felt like, or we were telling ourselves that it was impact or money and that they were different things. They're absolutely not. Money can create impact in the world that we're living in. And the second thing is, again, this was a symptom, I think, of me being a consultant, but I remember when I started as a founder, I was like, oh, I'm going to do the best market analysis and do the best systems diagrams and design the most well-engineered processes and all of those things. And at a certain point, I was like, oh shit, none of that matters. That's all a means to an end. We just have to build a good product and get people to pay for it and use it, and then sell it to as many people as we can. And all of that was just a means of doing that at scale. But we had to get the first thing right, and the second thing would follow, not the other way around. So hyper-prioritizing the fact that you're building a product or a service, you're selling it to someone, and you're trying to do that with as much velocity, scale, and margin as you possibly can, and just focus on the activities that let you do that, not all of the other fluff.
Okay, and then imagine you from 6 years ago sitting in front of you as you said that. How would that you react to you saying that?
I would have understood where I was coming from. I would have understood what those words meant, but I wouldn't have actually, like, it would have still been very difficult to accept to myself that we were still focusing on fluff. I would have been like, no, this isn't bullshit. We need to be doing this thing. We need to be doing these process diagrams, and we need to be, like, I would have told myself that we actually had to do those things. But the way in which I learned that all of that was bullshit was by doing it and then failing and then realizing that it was bullshit. So, like, I could have told myself, and I would have had those words in the back of my mind, and there were plenty of mentors and plenty of ex-founders that gave us advice and told us about what we're doing, and it registered. But it was only when we then failed in some of the things that we're talking about, they went, oh, that's what they were talking about, and had to kind of learn that for ourselves. So there's a happy medium between those two things. There's a happy medium between those two things. You're not just going to learn perfectly how to run a company or start a company just by hearing people do it. You're going to have to then go and do some of the things and fail. And some of your ideas and your plans smack you in the face and realize, oh, actually, that was kind of bullshit. To then realize what's not bullshit. So learning by doing and hearing.
There is, I think, like a natural reaction people have if you address a 20-year-old student and say, you need to make money. They think there's something wrong with you. Like, I think, and naturally, because that's an unusual position to come out with and say that should be a priority.
Yeah.
Would you agree that that should be something they're thinking about more, even if they do care about the impact purely of what they're doing?
Absolutely. I think it feels like a dirty word sometimes, and it felt like a dirty word for us as social impact entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it. Money felt like a dirty word, but ultimately for us, money is always going to be the thing that unlocks value, unlocks capacity, unlocks your ability to pay for tools, unlocks your ability to pay for new resources, opens up your ability to impact new markets and therefore help more people. So money is not a dirty word. Money is often a stepping stone to impact.
Okay, and last question to finish up, the entrepreneurial journey for yourself. So going from consulting to entrepreneurship and then next entrepreneurship, how has being an entrepreneur changed you as a person?
I think one of the most valuable things has been having the most amount of influence on how my career or how my job or how my finances support my own lifestyle and my own wants, as opposed to the other way around, where your career dictates what you can and can't do. So being an entrepreneur for me has, and it's even kind of part of the values of who we hire and kind of what type of a lifestyle and a culture we create and nurture within the company of Nifty. It's having control over the way in which your career doesn't dictate your lifestyle, but rather supports your lifestyle as a whole human being. For me as a leader, and for every single one of our employees, it's a fundamental value about how we design the company. Yeah.
I like that. The kind of self-determination that entrepreneurship provides. It's probably underrated, underappreciated by people.
Yeah, and the fact that you get to curate and have more influence over your world in a way that aligns with your values rather than necessarily fitting into the box of your employer or your large consulting corporation or that type of thing.
Well, I will say Nifty sounds like a box that most people would want to be in. If I'm a company watching this or I'm interested in working in no code, how do I get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, those two different avenues. One is we work very heavily in the US market, which is very much ahead in terms of the impact of low-code tools and their adoption in enterprises. So again, some of those big names you heard about are using low-code tools today. Australia is about getting there. So as an enterprise, if you actually do want to be ahead of the curve in terms of adopting solutions that enable you to get really quick to market, that you're not paying a massive overhead for large-scale digital transformation consulting firms rolling out heavyweight solutions, if you want to cut that overhead out and you want to be part of being ahead of that curve, speak to us. We back up rolling out low-code solutions with best practice consulting to enable your company to adopt them. So come and speak to me. And we have anything from media entertainment to large-scale tech to banks working with us. If you are either ex-consultant that wants to step into the startup world, or you're a product-led startup founder who's great with low-code tools like Bubble, Airtable, Notion, and everything else under the sun, and you're nifty at hacking those things together, come and speak to me, because we want people like you in our network.
Okay. God help your inbox. But I'm sure there's going to be interesting people reaching out. We're going to turn off the cameras now because we're going to do private Q&A, which we do each week here. So if you're watching at home, I'm sorry, but join us every Friday at 3:30 at UTS Startups at Central on the corner of Paris and Broadway. And I'll just say, thank you for going into that much depth about your journey. I think that is the information that people need to know through these kind of sessions. And I'm so excited for what Nifty is doing. I'm excited for Maslow to continue doing what it's doing as well and have the impact that it can. But there is a change afoot, and it's nice to be at the forefront of that and help all those kind of giant companies around here to have the productivity uplift and be realizing what they can thanks to all the technology and things that you can help them get. So it's exciting times. But please join me in thanking Andrew from Nifty.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Mary. Thanks for tuning in.